Hey everybody, it's Adam Frick with Folsom TV and Folsom Times. We are out here at the Folsom Chabad.
Got
Is
it.
that right?
Chabad
Okay.
Jewish Community Center.
Chabad. And I've got Rabbi Yossi GrossBaum talking to us a little bit about, the outpouring of support that has come from Folsom and in the current international conflict that's happening in the Middle East. Uh, you've dealt with this kind of stuff before, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Um, and Folsom, talk to us about your the support that you've got from Folsom.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to mention it's not. I think it's a little inaccurate to refer to it as a conflict because really there's no conflict. The Jewish people in Israel are very happy living in peace. They're not interested in hassling the neighbors. They're not interested in any conflict of any sort. The Hamas terrorists who control the Gaza Strip exclusively, there are no Israelis there, no control of the Gaza Strip at all. They're hell bent on destruction of the Jewish people. The charter calls for the eradication of any Jewish presence between the river and the sea. In other words, the entire region that's known as Israel. And they started every single time that there's any events of any sort, any quote unquote conflict, it's always because of a terrorist attack of some sort. And this is obviously the most horrific terrorist attack that Israel's ever endured.
Mhm.
Over 1,300 people killed and hundreds of people taken hostage, including babies, literally from toddlers and infants that have been taken as hostages.
Mhm.
Um, so this is not a conflict per se. This is
Right.
a terrorist attack. If Israel would lay down its arms and stop defending itself, Israel would cease to exist. If the terrorists would stop their terrorist attacks, if they would lay down their arms, there would be peace in the region in an instant. It's not a complicated matter. It's not a conflict.
Right.
So nothing personal, but
No,
that's
that's
the
okay.
wrong way of categorizing. It's the wrong way of putting it, in my
Right.
opinion. But the point is that just over a week ago Saturday, when these terrorist attacks took place, it was actually on the Sabbath and it was on a Jewish holiday called Simchat Torah, which is supposed to be a joyous holiday.
Right.
And unfortunately, that joy was shattered by these attacks. But locally, we've had a number of different experiences over here. First of all, it's affected our community very, very directly.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, it's a news report about some event happening thousands of miles away. Unfortunately, we're too immune to bad news somewhere else in the world, and
Sure.
it doesn't necessarily feel close to home. It doesn't necessarily affect us.
Right.
The reality in our community is that everyone knows someone who's directly affected.
Mhm.
There's someone in our community. The daughter's friend is
Mhm.
one of the young women. She's not even barely 20 years old, who was at that party
Concert.
that was attacked by terrorists, and she hasn't been heard of. So she hasn't been identified as one of the dead, meaning more than likely she's taken as a hostage, which is horrifying. And that's a friend of someone in our community.
And
We
a
have
friend of someone in the community. Did they live here or did they live elsewhere? But they're just friends of.
so the family's originally from Israel.
Okay.
They've been living here for the past number of years, and their daughter, still has friends over there, and they go back to visit every once in a while. Most of their family is in Israel, so one of her good friends, a close friend, she's in touch with regularly.
Yeah.
No one's been able to hear from her since then, and that's right here. And families over here have their siblings that live in the area.
Mhm.
There's families that have good friends that were, someone was just telling me yesterday. A woman was just telling me that her brother-in-law serves in the Israeli police force in whichever town, and they'd just gotten back from vacation before that weekend, and they'd requested volunteer. They wanted some extra security at that party,
Right.
so a number of his colleagues from his department volunteered, and they asked him if he wanted to come along. He's like, I just got back from vacation, I can't do it.
Mhm.
And 5 of his colleagues were killed in that attack.
Oh,
And this is a
wow.
brother-in-law of someone that lives here, so everyone is very, very closely connected.
Right.
The images of terrorists going house to house and shooting innocent people point blank range. And unfortunately, a lot of people have actually seen these videos because the terrorists wanted it to be. They wanted to promote terror, so
Right.
they're all wearing videos, GoPros, as they're going around shooting innocent people. Um, they're not hiding it. This is not some
No.
type of doctored footage. This is what they themselves are putting out there, trying to terrorize the population, and it's very effective. The reality is,
Hmm.
the terrorism really is effective because it's not logical, it's emotional,
It's
and
it's it's to achieve a political gain. That's the whole idea with terrorism.
well,
It's an act against civilians to achieve a political gain.
the reality is that we have families here in
Hmm.
Folsom, California, that live relatively secure environment.
Hmm.
You don't have terrorists running up and down our streets, thank God.
Well, we live in the Folsom
And
bubble.
yeah, but the reality is that people here are afraid that maybe that's going to happen to them over here.
Right.
Maybe someone's going to come and see that they're a Jewish family, going to come and start shooting at them in their house.
Right.
So does it make sense logically? Not really. I mean, there isn't any indication of any sort of any local threat of any sort. I mean, who knows? But people are afraid of that.
Right. Let's talk about your the local community
Hmm.
and the outpouring of support that you got not only from the Folsom Police Department, which the Folsom Police Department reached out to you,
Right.
right?
So we spoke with the police department, with Chief Hillman, and he had over the weekend to make sure
Hmm.
that there's a car over here with the officers, making sure that people in the community feel safe.
Yeah.
We haven't had any threats of any sort directed towards us, and there haven't been any indication of any regional threats.
Hmm.
But people are understandably scared.
Hmm.
So it was a very positive gesture from the police department to make sure that people are comfortable
Yeah.
by reaching out and ensuring that there's a presence over here that people should be more comfortable.
Yeah.
Even with that, by the way, even with that, there were way too many families that were afraid.
Yeah.
That they're afraid
Yeah.
to be in a place that's publicly identified as a Jewish place.
Right. I would imagine.
Yeah,
I would imagine. So,
yeah,
and our Folsom Police Department is very proactive. Great job, you guys.
yeah. It's true.
Very proactive in their pursuit of keeping our community pretty safe. So, and I'm glad that you've gotten the support from the police department, and several people have reached out
Hmm.
and called and texted
Yeah.
and emailed and
It's also the
whatnot.
broader region. I mean, the FBI, sorry, the FBI has also reached out,
Mhm.
and not only us, but the rest of the other Jewish communities in the region.
Mhm.
Um, had a conversation with the El Dorado County sheriff
Mhm.
today, and yeah, there's thank God there's a lot of support.
Yeah.
People recognize, thankfully, people recognize that terrorism is
On
not
our
an
shores.
acceptable.
Well, it's not just international now. I mean, obviously we've had terror attacks here,
Mm,
but it seems people have forgotten just
yeah.
how those things can happen here in America. And with the open borders, I'm afraid that um, we may have more cells here
Who knows?
that could be activated. Um, Folsom, you mentioned earlier before we got on camera that Folsom has a pretty rich history with Jewish community.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people know this.
No. Well, the Jewish community, in a formal sense, only was established in 2007.
Okay.
But there have been many Jewish people living here for
Hmm.
many years. I mean, some of the earliest members of the Folsom community were Jewish.
Hmm.
The Cohen family, the Hyman family, and this is just the ones I remember off the top of my head.
Hmm.
Some of the oldest gravestones in Folsom are from the Jewish community at that time. And yeah, the first librarian in Folsom
Yeah.
was Jewish. Now I forget her name. I think it was something. Her last name, if I remember correctly, was Levy. But
Levy. Okay.
we'll check it up. We can find out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Very cool.
there's been definitely been Jewish people here for quite some time, and I mean, right now we're we've gotten to the point where, I mean, our space for a long time has been insufficient for the community's needs. So
Sure.
we're in the process of building a much more appropriate space.
More appropriate space
Yeah.
for your
For
what what
community.
what do you call someone that attends your services or your Chabad?
As far as
Are they well because I know
congregant,
is it a congregant?
maybe congregant. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, yeah, that's a good
Okay.
question. You can wipe that part. If you want. No, but it's
Yeah.
the Jewish community is interesting in that Jewish people are not only, it's also people, not only a religion.
Yeah.
Is what I'm
Right.
saying. It's either you have people who are Jewish and would identify as Jewish and are Jewish, but don't observe
Sure.
any of the Jewish practices.
Right.
But they'll participate in cultural events. They'll participate in certain holidays, as this
Sure.
is part of their cultural heritage, even if it's not part of their religious observance.
Sure.
So it's a little bit different in a lot of ways than other religions, where
Right.
it's all about the religion. A Jewish person may be Jewish but not even know about it.
Right.
I actually just met with someone recently who was raised Catholic as a kid, ended up at some point, I'm not sure what it's called. It's called converting, but ended up moving to the Methodist Church, and then more recently, as an adult, discovered that their great grandmother, the mother's mother's mother, was Jewish.
Oh,
So
really?
according to Jewish tradition, if your mother's Jewish, then you're Jewish. If your mother's Jewish, then you're Jewish. So
Really?
you may not have any understanding of the religion, or may never have been raised with it, not know it, whatever. If your mother's
That's
Jewish, then you're
interesting.
still Jewish. Yeah.
What if your father is Jewish,
Right.
or what if your father's father was Jewish?
Right. Right. So according to Jewish tradition, according to Jewish law, I mean, it goes by the mother.
So,
the
so
Torah.
the matriarch is
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
is
The Torah highlights
Yeah.
the Jewish lineage, I guess you could say, goes through the mother. So it's obviously from the Jewish religious standpoint. Ideally, both you're not supposed to marry someone who's not Jewish. You're supposed to marry within the
Jewish
family, if you will, within the community. But if someone didn't, if it's a man, then the children are not Jewish. If the mother's not Jewish, if it's a woman, then the children are Jewish, even if the father's not.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So, in conclusion here, is there anything that you would like to say about not just the community or anything in general? Anybody who's wondering, what is our Jewish community in Folsom going through right now? What's happening? How can they help? Or
Yeah, I was actually speaking to the officer. One of the officers was here the other day, and as much as he was genuinely helpful and encouraging and supportive, he didn't really understand what it's like. And it's hard. I don't hold it. I don't begrudge anybody for not realizing. The reality is that, and the unfortunate reality is that the Jewish community has experienced terrible atrocities perpetrated against it throughout the ages. People are familiar with the Holocaust, but before the Holocaust, there were pogroms. Right, a pogrom was basically an attack on Jewish communities that was all too common in Jewish communities all over the world. And any negative event would be blamed on the Jewish community. They were convenient scapegoats, and if something bad would happen, suddenly a whole bunch of Jewish people would have their livelihoods destroyed, or family killed, or property, the house burnt down to the ground. I think that was a not uncommon experience. There were in the late 1800s, early 1900s, there was a huge influx of Jewish people moving here from what was then the Russian Empire, Ukraine and Russia, that region, because of just so many pogroms that were taking place, and it was sanctioned by the Tsar. It wasn't something that was any which way. They would sometimes go through motions supposedly to try and suppress these type of anti-Jewish activities, but the reality is that it was.
What's the source of this? So
the source of anti-Semitism?
Yeah.
So it's been studied, and it's been
I'm sure it has.
And the reality is that it's the unfortunate source of a lot of the anti-Semitic notions really goes back to a very uncomfortable place.
Okay.
The uncomfortable place is the church.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, a lot of the ideas that were perpetrated, that were sort of passed down in the generations of Jewish people, started. They all really go back to early days of Christianity, and
I mean, we all know the story,
So that's really where it started. there were other areas, different things that took place over generations that sort of expanded from there. But there's a number of important points. First of all, the Jewish community, on its own volition, was always somewhat separate from the rest of society in that there's kosher laws, which means that you can't eat with everybody else. There's Sabbath. We keep Friday night and Saturday as a Jewish Sabbath, where you don't engage in business or you don't travel and things like that, which also created a certain separation. Like I mentioned before, Jewish people made a priority to only marry within the faith. So there's a
But
certain separation.
Nothing really that conflicts with
No.
the law of the land or anything like that.
No.
So it's not like you're living two separate. You're in a nation, but living under separate laws.
Right.
You're
Well, in America, that's true.
Mhm.
But in Christian Europe, in the Middle Ages, you had to be Christian. And if you weren't Christian, there were laws against people that were not Christian. So Jewish people were always subject to those laws. In Islamic countries, where Islam was the law of the land, if you weren't Muslim, you were subject to second class citizenship. Basically, you were tolerated as long as you paid your taxes.
Right.
But there were special Christian lands always put special taxes on Jews. Islamic lands always put special taxes on Jews. It wasn't exclusively Jews. It was anyone that wasn't, Muslim or whatever.
Right. So I would imagine if
we look at it now from our American perspective, and we don't that doesn't compute. We don't understand it. But these countries were religious countries, and that's what prompted the revolution, the American Revolution, because that's where they were escaping, religious persecution.
Right, the freedom of religion here.
Right. So it's something we can't really relate to. So there was the fact that Jews would not accept, whatever dominant religion of the land was always a source of anti-Semitism. Another thing which was interesting was that in certain countries, in Christian countries, Christians weren't allowed to engage in lending money, weren't allowed to charge interest.
Charge interest.
Right.
So that's a Middle Eastern thing, isn't it?
It was European. It was not Middle East. It was
no. I mean, well, you finish your story. I'm sorry.
No. In the Middle Ages in Europe, Christian Europe, if you were not Jewish, if you're Christian, you were not allowed to lend money and charge interest. So it was prohibited. It was against the church. Basically, and the church made the law of the land, essentially.
Lend money and charge interest to whom?
To anybody.
To anybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So in Jewish law, you're not allowed to charge interest to a fellow Jew, but you're allowed to charge interest outside of the Jewish community.
Okay.
So the Jewish community is considered like family, essentially. If your brother needs a loan, right?
Right.
You're gonna lend them whatever it is if you have the ability to.
Sure.
It's like it's out of place to charge them interest, right? So that's the idea within the Jewish community, but outside the Jewish community, it's perfectly fine.
Right.
Nothing wrong with charging, lending money with a certain amount of interest. So the Jewish law allows for Jews to lend money. Christian law didn't at the time. So what ended up happening is that a lot of Jews were money lenders. As well as that, you had laws against Jews owning property. So a lot of the Jewish people would end up going into businesses that didn't involve owning property. One of those was diamonds. So what ended up happening is you had Jews that were involved in the diamond industry. You had Jews that were involved in money lending, and together with the old notions from that go back to the early days of Christianity, that Jews are greedy and stingy and all of that. So it fits well, money lenders and diamond merchants and whatever.
Right.
So that's how a lot of these things spread, and that's how.
But there were industries that you guys could get into.
They were the only ones that were available to the Jewish community. Yeah. There's another thing which is interesting, that in what's now Ukraine, the law of the land didn't allow for Christians to sell alcohol or produce alcohol, sell alcohol. So the vast majority of people that would sell alcohol, bars or taverns, were owned by Jews. And there was even a nickname for a Jewish bar owner was called Mushka. Even though Moshe is a Jewish name, Mushka is a kind of a nickname of the Jewish name Moshe.
Okay.
But that was like the generic name of any bar owner was Jewish, was Mushka. And the reason it was so common was because the local Christian population was not allowed by the law of the land to
But
sell alcohol. A Jewish community
Jews
could.
could.
Nothing wrong
Huh.
with it. From a Jewish standpoint, there's nothing wrong with it. So what
So
ended up happening?
all you did was just said if you just filled a need.
So well, not only fill the need, but it's also this is the only thing that you were able,
Right.
virtually the only thing you were able to do. So this is what people went into.
Sure.
So, but that also opens up a very easy line of attack, right? If you want to say that the Jews are causing degeneracy among the population, right? Look, all the drunkards are there and see what's going on. It's all because of the Jews. They're the ones that are feeding the population alcohol. They're the ones that are causing the population to get engaged in degenerate behavior.
Right.
That was a line of attack that was used against Jews in Ukraine, and essentially it's a hatred of someone who's different than you,
Right.
and that's what it boils down to. Jews were accused of being communists. Jews were accused of being capitalists.
Can't have it both ways.
Jews were accused of being wealthy, and Jews were being accused of being poverty-stricken. Dependence on society. It's a drag on society. So it's like whatever we do, we can't get it right. But that's in a very, very short nutshell. That's a little bit of the history of anti-Semitism, and the reality is that this is something that we've experienced as a community throughout the ages, coming to a head, obviously, with the Holocaust.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, right, with that sort of context, you can understand when something happens, people get very, very afraid. And it's not just it's not a logical thing, really. It's a irrational, emotional response. There aren't bands of terrorists driving around our streets, thankfully.
Right.
At least I hope they're not.
Right.
So, but people, they see what's going on in Israel, and they see these images of terrorists going house to house and shooting the inhabitants. It brings out this deep trauma that exists, and there's no two ways to put it. It's a very painful reality.
Right.
So obviously, for someone that's not Jewish and never had that sort of context, growing up with that sort of history and that knowledge of that history, it's very hard to really relate. I mean, it's just thousands of miles away. Like, why would it affect you directly? Okay, there are other people that are Jewish, fine, but it's so far and so distant. So first of all, the families are close. People have, are directly related. There's, in the rest of the world, what do they say? It's a 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
In the Jewish world, it's like 2 degrees of separation.
2 degrees, yeah.
Any Jew in the world, you can find a connection with them
pretty quickly.
With 2 degrees of separation, really.
Yeah.
But especially over here, where in our local community, we have quite a significant number of Israeli families or families that are originally from Israel, who have family in the immediate area. There were families that their siblings, parents, siblings were locked in their house, not knowing what's going on, for 48 hours. Afraid because it took a couple of days till they were able to secure the area and ensure that there were no terrorists on the loose. So it directly affects the community, but as well as that, coming with the context of thousands of years of unfortunate anti-Semitism in this history, the shadow of the Holocaust. And it really affects people on a very deep level. It's hard for someone that's not part of it to recognize, understand, to appreciate, but that's the reality.
Yeah. I feel for you, and I feel for our community here. One last thing before we go, just. Is there anything that you'd like to say to Folsom and those that have reached out and in support?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for everyone that reaches out. And people don't realize how much it means when you just reach out. When someone's going through anything, just reaching out and saying, "Hey, we're thinking of you. We support you." It means a huge amount. I mean, there's people asking, "What can we do? Can we give you something? Can we do something?" There really isn't that much you can. I mean, there's all types of organizations that are on the ground there in Israel that are, if you're looking to support, I can give all types of resources where to go. But locally, it really isn't that much that we need. But the support, knowing that there are people out there that have our back, that are supporting the community, that means a lot. It means a lot to people.
Is there a website or an email address maybe if people want to reach out and connect with you somehow?
Yeah. Well, my email address is rabbi@jewishfolsom.org.
Okay. And I would imagine the website is jewishfolsom.org.
The website is jewishfolsom.org. You got it.
Makes it very easy. All right. Well, thank you so much, Yossi. I appreciate you talking with us. And clearing up some of the things that people might be hearing around town,
Mm.
and just being available
Yeah. And
for
for the
us.
record, my favorite two topics to discuss
Hmm.
are the two topics that are, you know, off the table at any social gathering:
Yeah.
religion and politics. So I'm happy to discuss. If anyone has any questions,
Yeah.
if they want to know more about the region or about,
Yeah.
the history of
Hmm.
what's going on over there, and they want to know about anything Jewish related,
Yeah.
happy to reach out. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I
Pleasure.
appreciate it. Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you soon.